All right, let's dive into something pretty fascinating, if a bit unsettling. We're talking about the Holocene extinction, the sixth mass extinction. And this time, it's not an asteroid, right? This time, it's us, human activity.
Hmm.
And we've got some great articles here. Some are straight up science, some look at the politics of it all, and even a few that explore potential solutions. So consider this your crash course on the Holocene extinction, what it is, why it should matter to you, and what we can possibly do about it.
Yeah, and it's really important to grasp the sheer scale of what we're facing. Extinction rates right now, they're estimated to be 100 to 1,000 times higher than the natural background rate. To put it another way, species are vanishing way faster than they should be.
Yeah, that's a pretty stark number for sure. So let's get right to it. What exactly is the Holocene extinction, and how is it different from those previous extinction events?
Well, the Holocene extinction, it's also sometimes called the Anthropocene extinction. It's basically the ongoing and rapid decline in biodiversity, and this is happening right now during the Holocene epoch. But the difference is the previous five extinction events, those were triggered by natural things, volcanic eruptions or asteroid impacts. This one, though, is linked directly to us, to what we humans are doing.
So we're talking about deforestation, pollution, climate change. All of that is playing a role.
Precisely. Since 1970, vertebrate populations, and that includes mammals, birds, fish, reptiles, amphibians, those have declined by, get this, an average of 68%. And that's particularly alarming because it's all happened in just a few decades.
Wow. That is a huge loss in a really short amount of time. There's one article that paints a really vivid picture of this happening right now. In the Amazon rainforest, it says over 17% of it has been destroyed in just the last 50 years. And that's because of things like logging and agriculture.
Yeah. And it's not just the Amazon, of course. Overfishing is another clear example. Bluefin tuna, for instance, their populations have crashed by over 90%. Sharks, too, are facing enormous pressure. Many species are critically endangered because of the demand for shark fin soup, unfortunately.
It's like we're systematically, I don't know, dismantling the very ecosystems that support life on Earth.
That's a good way to put it, yeah. And the consequences, as the research points out, they're significant, not just for, the species that we're losing, but for everything, the whole web of life, us included.
So let's break down the specific drivers behind the Holocene extinction. The main culprits, so to speak. What are they?
Well, the research highlights several key drivers, and it's important to remember that they're all interconnected. They create, you could say, a perfect storm of environmental threats. First and foremost is habitat disruption and fragmentation. We talked about deforestation, but it goes way beyond that. Palm oil plantations in Southeast Asia, for instance, they're destroying orangutan habitats. And then you have urban development. It's encroaching on vital coastal wetlands. We're basically squeezing species out of their homes.
Right. And then there's the overexploitation of resources, which we see so clearly with, like you said, overfishing, but it's happening on land too, like the poaching of elephants and rhinos for their ivory and horns.
Exactly. And then there's pollution. We can't forget about that. The Great Pacific Garbage Patch, it's a floating mass of plastic waste. It's twice the size of Texas. It's a really stark reminder of, our impact. And then you have things like agricultural runoff, creating these dead zones in places like the Gulf of Mexico, where marine life can't survive because of low oxygen levels.
And of course, we have to talk about climate change. It's already impacting ecosystems all over the planet, from coral bleaching in the Great Barrier Reef to melting glaciers that disrupt mountain ecosystems.
Absolutely. And invasive species are another major threat. These are non-native organisms that can really harm ecosystems. One of the articles mentions the brown tree snake in Guam, accidentally introduced during World War II, and it ended up decimating native bird populations there, driving several species to extinction.
Talk about unintended consequences. That's a pretty dramatic example of how human actions can have these ripple effects, things we just don't anticipate.
Right. Another example is the kudzu vine. It's rapidly taking over huge areas of the U.S. South. It outcompetes native plants, reduces biodiversity. And then, of course, there are diseases like chytrid fungus, which is a deadly skin disease. It's wiping out amphibian populations worldwide, which leads to cascading effects within ecosystems.
It seems like we're, I don't know, bombarding our planet with threats from every direction. Global trade and urbanization, they're playing a role too, right? I mean, the world is more connected than ever, but that also makes it easier for invasive species and diseases to spread.
Exactly. Ships carrying ballast water, they can introduce invasive marine species to new environments. The exotic pet trade can spread diseases to native wildlife. Even something like light pollution, which might seem harmless, it can actually disorient migrating birds and sea turtles.
So we've got habitat loss, overexploitation, pollution, climate change, invasive species, diseases, and then the ripple effects of global trade. A pretty bleak picture, isn't it?
It is, yeah. But the thing is, all these drivers, they're interconnected. They often make each other worse. For instance, climate change can worsen habitat loss and make species more susceptible to diseases.
It's a vicious cycle. And this brings us to a particularly interesting and concerning aspect of this whole extinction event. It's the role of oil. And this policy blueprint called Project 2025.
Yeah. One of your sources really digs into the connection between the rise of oil, the fossil fuel industry, and the Holocene extinction. It argues that, our insatiable demand for oil has fueled many of the environmental problems we're dealing with today.
So we're talking deforestation to clear land for drilling, oil spills and refinery pollution,
Mm-hmm.
and of course the burning of fossil fuels, which drives climate change.
Yes, and Project 2025 makes things even more concerning. It's basically a conservative policy blueprint, and it aims to dramatically expand fossil fuel production and weaken environmental regulations.
One article describes it as throwing gasoline on an already raging fire, which I guess is a pretty fitting analogy. This plan proposes things like opening up protected areas to drilling and weakening the authority of environmental protection agencies.
One specific example they highlight is this proposal to open the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge to drilling, which would not only be devastating for caribou populations, but also, accelerate the melting of permafrost, releasing even more greenhouse gases into the atmosphere.
So while we're dealing with the consequences of our dependence on oil, there are actually plans in place to, double down on the very activities that are driving this extinction crisis,
Hmm.
which I guess raises a really important question. What does the Holocene extinction mean for us? What are the consequences for humanity?
That's where we need to shift our focus from the loss of biodiversity to the potential impact on human societies. And the research suggests those impacts are very real and they could be devastating.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to feel kind of overwhelmed by all of this. It's a big problem.
It is. It is a daunting challenge, no doubt. But it's important to remember that even small actions, they can make a difference. One of the articles really emphasizes that we need a multi-pronged approach. And some of the solutions are, well, they're not what you might expect. They go beyond the traditional environmental actions.
So it's not just about, reducing our carbon footprint or supporting those conservation efforts.
Yeah, exactly. We're also talking about, some pretty cutting edge technologies like artificial intelligence to actually address the crisis. In fact, one of the articles, it really dives deep into the potential of AI to combat the Holocene extinction, and it's fascinating stuff.
Okay, I'm intrigued. How can AI help with something like this?
Well, imagine like AI-powered drones and satellites. They're constantly monitoring ecosystems all over the world. They could track species populations, monitor forest health. They could even detect illegal activities, like poaching or deforestation. And then they could alert the authorities, in real time.
So you like having like a global security system for nature.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. AI can also analyze like massive amounts of data to identify the best spots for reforestation or species reintroduction. It could basically help us, restore and rewild ecosystems.
So using AI to give nature a helping hand.
Exactly. But it goes beyond that. AI can also help us predict how climate change is going to impact biodiversity. And that'll allow us to, focus our conservation efforts in the places that are most vulnerable.
It's like, I don't know, having a crystal ball that shows us where to focus our attention.
Yeah.
But some of these potential applications of AI, they sound kind of like science fiction. One of the sources even mentioned using AI in genetic research to help preserve endangered species, or even bring back extinct ones through synthetic biology.
It does sound like science fiction, but the potential is there. But AI's role, it isn't just about conservation, It can also help us transform industries, make them more sustainable. For example, AI can optimize renewable energy grids, predict energy demand, improve energy storage solutions. So it can actually help us, transition to a cleaner energy future faster.
So we could use AI to power our world while minimizing our environmental impact.
Exactly. And in agriculture, AI-powered precision farming, that could reduce waste and maximize yields. It'd make food production way more efficient, way more sustainable, which is crucial as the global population keeps growing.
It's all about, I guess, working smarter, not harder. What about carbon capture and storage? Does AI have a role there?
It does, yeah. AI can actually boost the efficiency of those technologies. It can help us remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere so we can, mitigate climate change. It'd be like having a giant vacuum cleaner for the planet.
Look, that's a powerful image. But technological solutions are exciting and all, but we also have to deal with those systemic issues, the ones that are really driving this crisis.
Oh, absolutely. We need to reform our governance structures and our policies. Sustainability and environmental protection have to be the priority. And actually, your sources suggest that AI could even help promote transparent governance.
Really? How so?
Well, imagine an AI system. It's constantly monitoring, government and corporate compliance with environmental laws. It could flag violations, hold polluters accountable.
Wow. That would be a game changer when it comes to enforcement.
Yeah, it could be. And on a global scale, AI could help countries cooperate on environmental issues by, modeling outcomes of different agreements, suggesting compromises that work for everyone. It would be like having a digital diplomat working behind the scenes to broker environmental peace treaties.
So these applications of AI, they're all over the place. One of the sources brought up this intersection of AI and cybersecurity and even cyber warfare as they relate to the environment. How does that fit in?
Well, on one hand, it's about protecting vital environmental data from cyber attacks. Imagine databases with information about endangered species or climate change models, that kind of information falling into the wrong hands.
Right, so we have to protect this information from, hackers or other bad actors. That makes sense. But what about using AI in cyber warfare to actually combat, environmental threats?
That's where things get really interesting and potentially controversial. One source suggested that AI-driven cyber operations could be used to disrupt the financial and logistical networks of, illegal loggers, poachers, polluters.
So it would be like using, digital weapons to fight environmental crime.
It's a bold idea, and it definitely raises some ethical questions. But it shows that there's potential for some unconventional approaches in this fight.
So we've talked about monitoring ecosystems, restoring habitats, optimizing industries, even fighting environmental crime in the digital realm. It seems like AI has the potential to really change the game here.
It does, but it's important to remember that technology is just one part of the solution. We also need to change our behavior, our values, and the systems that, keep these unsustainable practices going.
It sounds like a monumental task. Where do we even begin?
It starts with recognizing that we need to, fundamentally change how we see our relationship with nature. We're part of nature, not separate from it. And our actions, they have consequences.
So what can individuals do? Do small actions even matter when we're talking about a crisis this big?
Absolutely. Every action counts. From reducing our carbon footprint to supporting sustainable businesses to just spreading awareness about this crisis, we can all contribute to change.
So it's about making conscious choices in our everyday lives, like choosing to walk or bike instead of driving, eating less meat, reducing energy consumption at home, supporting businesses that prioritize sustainability. I mean, those actions might seem small, but
I think they add up.
yeah.
And don't underestimate the power of collective action either. Voting for leaders who prioritize environmental protection, participating in protests and advocacy efforts, even just talking about these issues, all of that can create real pressure for change.
One source even brought up the idea of like a general strike as a way to, force governments and corporations to take these environmental issues seriously.
That would certainly get their attention. It highlights the need for a global response. We need international collaboration to tackle these big problems: climate change, biodiversity loss, all of it.
It's a global crisis.
Yeah.
Needs global solutions.
Yeah.
But with all these grim statistics and the scale of the challenges we're up against, it's easy to lose hope.
It is, yeah. But it's so important to remember that we still have time to act. Although that window is closing fast. The Holocene extinction, it's a human-caused crisis, which means, we have the power to change course.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the Holocene extinction, where do we go from here? What are like the key takeaways for our listeners? So much to think about. We've covered a lot of ground here, from the reality of the Holocene extinction to those cutting edge solutions, AI and all that. What stands out to you as the most important thing for our listeners to take away from all this?
Well, I think the key takeaway is this. This crisis is huge, sure, but it's not hopeless. We caused this problem, which means we can fix it. We have the ability.
It's good to remember that, right? We're not just, watching this happen. Our choices, what we do individually and as a society, those choices really matter. They'll shape what happens next.
Absolutely. And all the solutions we've talked about, switching to renewable energy, using AI for conservation, I mean, it shows we're not starting from zero. We have tools, we have knowledge, and maybe most importantly, people are starting to understand the problem.
One of the sources had this analogy really stuck with me. It said, we're in a leaky boat, arguing about who made the hole. It won't help. We got to bail water and we got to work together to fix the leak.
Yeah, that's a good one. We can't just blame each other or give up. We got to act and we got to cooperate. It's urgent, yes, but it's not impossible.
So we've talked about big changes like policy reform and all those technological innovations. But what about just what people do in their own lives? A lot of folks probably think their choices don't really make a dent in a problem this big.
I think those individual actions, they matter a lot. Every single choice. From what we eat to how we get around, supporting sustainable businesses, consuming less, speaking up for change in our communities, all those things, they have a ripple effect. And they show the people in charge, the ones with power, they show them that we care about this.
Yeah, it's about changing our culture. So that sustainability becomes normal, not something special. And it feels like that shift, it's already starting. More and more people are, eating less meat, trying to reduce their waste, choosing products that are better for the environment.
That's good to see. And don't underestimate raising awareness. Talking to your friends and family about the Holocene extinction, sharing information, supporting organizations doing good work, all that expands the circle of people who get it, who are informed and involved.
So even though the Holocene extinction is, well, it's a serious thing, it's not game over yet. We're smart enough. We have the tools. We can build a better future.
We can. And it's really important to remember that because if we just, fall into despair and do nothing, we're basically giving up on ourselves and the planet. But if we choose hope, if we choose to act, then we can make a real difference.
Well said. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We hope it's given you some food for thought, maybe even some inspiration.
Yeah. Remember, the future isn't set in stone. What happens to life on Earth, and to us, it depends on what we do right now.
Let's make good choices. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.